Welcome. I'm Harmony Slater, your host of the Finding Harmony podcast. Over the past 20 years, I've taught thousands of yoga teachers and students to explore the intersection between ancient wisdom and modern everyday life, using mind-body practices to heal, awaken, and manifest their dreams from the inside out. This podcast is a sanctuary for those feeling overwhelmed by life's challenges. Are you ready to jump in and discover how these challenges aren't actually in the way, but are the way to finding harmony? Let's invite the magic back in. Hi, welcome to the Finding Harmony podcast. If you're thinking about joining B School this summer, then be sure you get in this week. Doors close on Friday. You can find out all the details on my website, harmonyslater.com. It's your last chance to get one-on-one guidance from me and group accountability. It's going to be an amazing summer. So build the business of your dreams and come do it with me. And speaking of building a business of your dreams, today I am connecting with Kate O'Donnell, a dear friend of mine for decades. She is the author of a new book. She's authored several books, but today we are talking about her book, Everyday Ayurveda for Women's Health. And Kate has built her own incredible business. She is an international speaker, best-selling author, educator. She's also an authorized Ashtanga yoga teacher, as well as a holistic health expert. She's an incredible woman who's doing incredible things in the world, and we are going to sit down and talk all about women's health, and especially women's health when it comes to the Ashtanga yoga practice, what she's experienced, what she's learned, what inspired her to write this incredible book. So I know you're going to love this episode. We're diving into yoga, health and wellness, Ayurveda, and all things spiritual, physical, mental, emotional, you name it. Kate and I are going to go there, and it's all for women today. So let's dive right in. Hi, welcome to the Finding Harmony podcast. I'm your host, Harmony, and I'm here today with a beautiful human being who we have interviewed before, Kate O'Donnell. Hello, Kate. How are you?
Good. It's good to see you, Harmony. Been a while.
It's good to see you too. The Ayurveda goddess. What's your official title these days?
I go by author more than anything, but holistic health expert, Ayurveda practitioner, influencer. That's a new one that's getting added on there. Yeah. So I would say Ayurveda expert is probably the most accurate.
All right. So Ayurveda goddess works.
Yeah, definitely.
Wonderful. Well, we're having a chat. I think some of our listeners obviously will know you because you've been with us twice already. But long time ago. So if they want to hear your story and how you got into it and ventured to India and did all the things and practiced Ashtanga yoga for many, many years, they can go back and listen to your story. But today we are going to talk about what you're an expert in, which is Ayurveda and your new book.
Yes. Everyday Ayurveda for Women's Health.
Yes. And I was very excited to hear that you're writing a book about Ayurveda specifically for women's health because, I'm not an Ayurveda expert, but I haven't really seen many books out there about Ayurveda specifically for women's health.
It's true. We don't have the book yet. Yeah, which, for each of my books, I've been like, we don't have this book yet. And then I make it, So this one came in as, after the third book, I was like, oh my gosh, I really need to just not keep churning out books. It's almost like an uncontrolled impulse.
That's amazing. It's an amazing impulse, Kate. I don't know how you do it. I feel like you write these books and all of them are so brilliant and have a different take on Ayurveda, and they all are so useful. Our kitchen is stacked of your first 3 books. So
yeah, that's great.
We have to get the 4th one to add to our collection. But it's incredible. Writing one book to me feels more challenging than giving birth to a child. So, I mean, I can't believe you've written 4 already.
Yeah. No kids. So that's part of it. That's part of it is a lot of my colleagues have really had to refocus their energy for a number of years. Some of them are just starting their books now when their kids are, 10, 12 years old. So these are my kids in a way.
Your babies.
This is the creative energy is being channeled in this way.
Yeah, it's so good. So as a woman, what are the specific things or what makes what I need to look out for, especially like in relationship to Ayurveda or maybe some of the advice in Ayurveda different than what my male counterparts would need to be concerned about?
So the body that we call female is the one that has the uterus, the fallopian tubes, the ovaries, and the menses, the period. And that's a big difference is that women lose every month, ounces of blood.
Yes.
So menstrual blood is a combination of endometrial cells and what we call in Ayurveda Rakta, which is the red blood cells. Yeah.
I like that name.
Yeah, I know. Rakta just means red.
That sounds really good.
Yeah, it's pretty
Sounds
cool.
magical.
Yes, there's so much magic here, Harmony. That's ultimately one of the things I really want to bring to the forefront about the woman's body is the magic and the amazing renewal for those who menstruate, right? It's like every month there is a creation of new blood. And that's something that is specific to these bodies that are bleeding. And that's a very big difference in how we want to nourish our bodies and in how we want to exercise.
Yes.
For example, and how we look at our cycles of activity and rest. That is, I think, a very big deal. And I think women's bodies are cyclical in a specific way because of the renewal of the blood. And that's attuned to the moon, which I know is something that you talk about a lot, right? I've heard you talk about that. And I think it was baked into our yoga community, lunar cycles.
It's totally the one thing that not the one thing, but obviously there's a lot of things I appreciate about the Ashtanga yoga system and lineage. But it is something that I think is quite unique to Ashtanga yoga as the practice and as a lineage and as a system of yoga in that it is very attuned to the lunar cycle. And I think like even as a collective, right? Even for men, it's like tuned to the lunar cycle, which is of benefit to the practice and to the practitioners because it immediately connects us to nature. But like, as you're talking here, it also is quite about like channeling this divine feminine energy, actually, right? Like the Shakti of this lunar cycle and having reverence for it in a way.
Yes. And awareness of it. I feel like step 1 is awareness, right? And then reverence may come naturally from that place. And so we're kind of in a culture where productivity is number 1 every day of the week, all day, all month long, where at the center of Ayurveda is this idea of opposites in balance. Right. So like we take it all the way back to like the 5 elements that make up Ayurvedic anatomy and we look at their qualities. Some of them are hot, some of them are cold, some of them are heavy, some of them are light, right? So there's this duality, which comes from the Purusha Prakriti duality, right? In the Samkhya philosophy, which underlies yoga as well as Ayurveda. And so we get this coexisting opposites. So one of the coexisting opposites that I'm bringing to the forefront in this body of work for women's health is the balance between activity and rest. And we could I call that solar and lunar energy.
Nice.
Right. So the solar energy is like your right nostril, right side of the bod, moving to the right, pose on the right side first, right? Like all this right side stuff it's their solar energy. And that's the like, what I call the rah-rah shishkumba energy, And then we have the lunar energy, which has historically been considered as sort of the female end quote energy, right? It's like it's slower, it's smoother, it's softer, it's juicier and more receptive. And it's less about doing and more about being, experiencing, even absorbing potentially, right? Like taking in instead of putting out. And so I think the problem, Harmony, that we've got, you'll, I'm sure, agree in your practice that there's a lot of putting out and not as much putting in. And it's a cultural phenomenon, right?
Yeah.
That we really need to address this, what I call essential balance, between solar and lunar aspects of ourselves.
I feel like this is very much the topic of our era, actually, that we're in right now. Everyone's talking about nervous system regulation and balancing the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system and strengthening the vagal tone so you can activate the vagus nerve to, increase your parasympathetic stimulation so you can actually rest and get a good night's sleep and come down from having to show up and have all that solar energy. And I think exactly what you're talking about, in sort of more metaphorical yoga terms is really this regulation of our nervous system. And it's so crucial because exactly as you're saying, we're really, I think, being provoked to be stuck in this solar energy, in this constantly needing to be on, constantly vigilant, constantly, putting out fires, constantly creating, right?
Yep.
And there's not really time built in for replenishing, for resting, for renewal.
Right. Right. Where the place where we do find that baked in is in the 28-day lunar cycle.
Yeah.
In an ideal world, it's the new moon. The new moon is the dark moon, and that's the time where all the energy can turn inward. And we can really focus on optimizing our prana. Because when we're putting out all the time, the prana is moving out from the central axis all the time. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about a yoga practice is how it builds prana. It builds, like, Ashtanga is very special. I love it because it bakes the vessel to hold prana.
Yeah.
In a very special way.
Yeah.
And I feel so grateful to have that in my life because I do think that my physical body is able to hold prana and to move prana, to circulate it and process it pretty efficiently. But what I'm seeing a lot of in my community and my practice is that we lose a lot of prana. It's seeping out through our voice and our eyeballs and all the listening we're doing, the talking and as you say, the creating and the stressing, So my sense of it is that, when a woman's bleeding or when the moon is new, doesn't matter if you're bleeding or if you're a woman, when the moon is new, right, which is the dark moon, that is the time to really just focus on building prana and potentially preserving prana.
Yeah.
Right, as opposed to just blowing it out our ear like we tend to do as we go through life. Yeah,
I love that. It is interesting. I kind of this was something that came into my awareness recently, was like, I like to listen to podcasts or, I love learning, as I'm sure you do, right? And so for a while, I was always kind of listening to something or when I was cleaning the house or going for a walk. And I started to think, I think I just really need silence. I think I can't be having all of this energy all the time because as you say, it's going out your ear while you're listening.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I'm glad to hear you say that because I feel like I'm in the minority that I'm very judicious about my use of podcasts.
Yeah.
I don't just put them on all the time. Sometimes I'm taking a walk. It's oh, I should listen to that. And then it's no, you shouldn't, just the mind needs to breathe. The mind needs to expand,
Yeah. And I think, I think it speaks to your ability to also channel and create and write and be an author because you can't actually I think, write and create when you're consuming so much information from other sources. You have to have that silence and that open space and that time of just like really drawing in from that silence or just natural sounds, right?
Yeah, that's exactly my process. Yeah. When I write a book, there's a 6-month period of quiet where it's percolating, like I've got the flame on and it's just like it's circulating through the vessel. Yeah, and there's a lot of energy that literally feels that it comes from above, down into like the head space. And then when the time is right, it's going to come through the hands.
I love
with
it.
the typing,
Yeah.
And it's like, it's a very specific experience I have in my karmendriyas, in my body that I channel it. But there's a solid, I would say after 4 rounds of writing that it's a 6-month thing for me to just allow space and not try to write yet, just allow the space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also I'm hearing guard the space too.
Yeah, preserve it.
Preserve it, yeah.
I get what you're saying about guard, because especially with something like social media, which can become an addictive habit, like we do have to guard our attention. And our attention is the commodity now.
Yeah, I know. How'd that happen?
Yeah. Oh, man. It's a crazy world. Like, it's such a wild time. I think humans will have always said this about their current time, but I do think that the wisdom of and the practices of yoga and Ayurveda, the practical, like the stuff you actually do on your daily routine, I think is needed more than ever.
Yeah. So we talked about the benefit of like Ashtanga yoga kind of paying attention or tuning us at least somewhat to the moon, especially if you're practicing in sort of a more traditional kind of lineage or style, But before we got on, you were saying that most Ayurvedic practitioners would say, don't do Ashtanga. Why is that?
I think because it's so vigorous, right? So like the Ayurveda texts describe that exercise is that which makes the body tired.
Right.
Where everybody's complaining about being exhausted. So what the hell are we doing getting up at 4 and like doing this thing, right? So that already starts to feel like a disconnect if you don't look closer at, at the situation. And it's said that we want to get just to the point where sweat begins to form and then cool down. And so that's not what happens in Ashtanga. It's like, we want to sweat, we want to cook it, and there are, I think, a lot of bodies and more specifically, a lot of nervous systems that aren't ready for that, which is, I think, why our teachers would take it so slow.
Right.
Like you're building the subtle system more than even your ability to like bind your hands or whatever. And I think that's the thing over the years that is confusing for a student when you're not moving them on and they're like, but I can do it. Yeah. And you're like, yeah, but your train is like rocking on the track right now. We need to allow time for stabilizing the system. So if a person has like a very heavy and dense and slow constitution and a tendency towards stagnation, then yes, I think traditional Ayurveda practitioners would be like, yeah, man, get up at the sunrise and bust a move, do the thing. But we have so many people with what we call vata imbalances, where the nervous system is unsteady, it's frayed, the rhythms of the body are off,
Yeah. And that leads to all kinds of problems too, right? Like a lot of people, I hear all the time, people are having trouble sleeping, a lot of sleep disruptions, sleep problems, getting to sleep, waking up, unable to, all of that's a vata imbalance, really, right?
Yeah. Yes, definitely. And a lot of it, I think, does have to do with that we blow prana out our ear, And I think something like, my teacher, Nancy, she always used to say, it's never the practice, it's always the practitioner.
Yeah.
Like making the trouble. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I do think that Ashtanga is like playing with fire.
Yeah.
Which is, of course, why I love it, because I'm just like a badass like that, I guess. But the play, like, in the wrong hands or without proper guidance, it can definitely mess stuff up, Yeah. And I think there is probably, a lot of that out there, but there's also a lot of like really qualified teachers, practitioners, and really solid communities, where things are manifesting in this really beautiful way that's totally health giving.
That's part of it too, is the approach, right? Maybe like a full-on primary series practice, like let's just go right back to basics. Maybe at a certain stage, if Vata is imbalanced, a full-on primary series practice isn't the practice you need or isn't the practice that's good for you. But,
Right.
Maybe it's sun salutations and some standing and closing, in a very like slow therapeutic way, or maybe it's just doing some sun salutations and resting, right? But there's going to be some, like you say, you can move your body in a way that, the sweat maybe just is coming and then you're resting to replenish and nourish. But our egos get so caught up and attached to this idea that we have to perform and we have to do a whole series and we have to keep progressing and keep getting more advanced, whatever advanced means in our ego brains, which is like more fancy postures or do it faster or don't touch the ground when you're jumping back and jumping through or do a handstand or, right? Like we attribute all of these status points along the way to the practice, which have nothing to do with yoga. Nothing to do with nourishing ourselves, nothing to do with balance. They're just our ego making little, treats for us to collect and consume to keep us going, to keep us motivated. And there's some wisdom in that. But like you say, it's also very solar driven then, rather than practicing in a way that's replenishing or receptive or reviving our inner being. We're, again, kind of like tapping into this external energy more when we're focused on what it looks like or doing more or needing it to be a certain way.
Absolutely. This brings to mind, Harmony, like a concept that's really central to my understanding of how I wrote this book.
Yeah.
That I feel like this particular audience, that you've cultivated are people who I can lay this down right now, right?
The secret.
So, we hear about fire element.
Yeah.
Well, it's like, it's for me a very hard won experiential understanding of how Ashtanga affects the fire element in the body.
Yeah.
And how that has ramifications for our health and especially for women's health.
Yeah, I love that.
So, yeah, I got goosebumps. It's good. So the fire element is like, fire element is the sun, right? It's the solar. It is like the basis of solar energy in the body.
Right.
Of course, we blow some air on it, like a forest fire. Poof, it goes up. And that's the problem when with a like ego-driven, as you say, kind of practice where it's like you put a fan on the flame and the thing is just poof, right? Yeah. Burns you up. You get inflammation. You get irritated. You get all these kind of fire type imbalances. Very common, I think, in the early years of practice.
Yeah.
And because we're playing with fire.
Yes.
But what I've started to really take home is the subtle aspect of fire element. So like in yoga, as in Ayurveda, right? Anything that's physical also has a subtle essence. That's why when we offer, I remember the first time I was taught to do a puja, we put the bananas there. Yeah. And then we all sat down to eat and they pulled the bananas and started giving them to the humans. And I was like, didn't you just give those to the gods? And they were like, oh, no, they took they ate theirs. They took the subtle essence. You know what I mean? We can eat just the nuts and bolts of the banana and like build tissues because we're down here on the ground. So there's always that subtle aspect, of a reality. So the subtle aspect of fire, of Agni, is tejas. The tejas I describe it as, and there's a picture in the book, in the very front of the book, of a burning flame, right? Like a fire in somebody's backyard. And so it's the burning embers, not the like flamey flame.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Right. So it's like this part down here that's like those glowing coals.
Yeah.
Right. So I envision that like when I practice and when I meditate on that which brings radiance to our bodies, to our presence, to our mind as well. And that the word I've landed on for that is luminosity. Ooh. You see that word a lot in the Ayurveda texts, right? So tejas is responsible for luminosity of skin and eyes, for example, right? Which is like, when somebody's got that, right? And when somebody's done a lot of, let's say, Vedic practice, they will have that, there's like, it's a spark. It's not like that like crazy weird eye contact where you feel like they're boring into you, right? It's just there's a twinkle in the eye is another translation from the text that I absolutely love.
Yeah.
So that flame is like, it's that subtle kind of embers, coal burning where the heat is in the same way that we preserve and protect and potentially guard our prana.
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to do the same with tejas.
Yeah.
We preserve it, we protect it, we guard it, and we stoke it.
Mm.
But anybody knows if you build a fire and you go in there and you blow on it with like a, horn or something, crazy, or you're all erratic in the way that you do it, that it's not going to feed the flame properly. You're not going to get that steady glow, which that is what brings the luminosity and the radiance into our personalities, into our physicality. And that if we're looking at a reality where people are sort of compulsively gravitating towards solar activities and solar qualities and solar manifestations in their daily lives, then we're blowing on the flame all wrong.
Yeah, or
right?
all the time.
Yeah, exactly. So that potential for our luminosity becomes inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a misguided flame in the body, So
yeah,
we want to bring it back. We want to bring it back from that sort of ranging around being crazy and causing inflammation, which is such a big problem right now for a lot of people. We want to draw it back into its central axis and allow it to sort of settle in its nature, which is just those glowing embers.
Yeah, wonderful. So how can we do that?
Yeah, definitely.
How do we do that? How do we like take caution against overdoing it or creating this inflammation? Especially if you are experiencing it, if you are even a yoga practitioner who, is trying their hardest to get up early and do their practice and, be a good Ashtanga practitioner or any other kind of yoga practitioner, but is also experiencing I would assume too that the other thing is then burning out, right? That basically the flame kind of gets extinguished in a way, or like gets sort of spread out into the whole different parts of the body, which is probably related to the inflammation as well, rather than being concentrated and built up in a concentrated kind of way. So how do we make sure we're doing that instead of the other thing?
Yeah. So like everything, there's sort of two approaches. One is through the physical and one is through the subtle.
Yeah.
And I find that, some people gravitate towards one or the other. For our audience here, I could probably talk about subtle. Yeah.
I think the subtle's interesting.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
Really
Me too.
interesting.
Yeah.
I feel like that's really where that's actually what has to change. I've looked at a lot of different ways of transforming or changing habits or doing that kind of stuff. And I think if you just focus on the physical things, it's like it can kind of shift for a while, but unless you shift at the subtle level, the change isn't really lasting. It's not really effective,
No, that's exactly true. That's why I wrote the second book about the mind.
Yeah.
Is because after I'd worked with a client for a year or so, the problem comes back.
Yeah.
If the subtle manifestation or the subtle causative factor hasn't been addressed. And that's the heart of this book, is that our compulsive leaning towards solar activities, we gravitate towards the familiar. We're comfortable in that which we know, in that which we've been conditioned to experience. I think that it is a countercultural, badass activity for women to slow down.
Yeah.
I think it's like a big fuck you.
Yeah.
Dare
to rest.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I say in the book. I'm like, I dare you to rest. I dare you, because all the shit comes up when you quiet down, right? That's the first thing that happens when you slow down is you realize how fast the subtle body is moving, how the nervous system is vibrating, how the mind is racing. We didn't notice those signs when everything was just moving.
Yeah.
So that it's that creation of space and a little bit of the slow quality in our everyday, right? So one of the things I talk about a lot going to get physical for a second here, right? Like nuts and bolts things people can try, let's say.
Yeah.
So one of the things I recommend a lot is what we call that Vata time of day. So the time of day where the air element is the most busy is from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. It's like the afternoon, whereas that's when people get tired and they eat chocolate and they drink that second
It's the 4 o'clock
coffee,
coffee
right?
hour.
Yeah, exactly.
Or the
like that.
5 o'clock fuckets.
Yeah. And it's natural. Like you know, if you look at a brain EKG, like most people around somewhere 3:30, 4:30, it goes down. Like it's natural. It's natural. And the body wants to rest. The body wants like a little nourishment in the form of rest between those hours. But a lot of the time we'll push it.
Yeah.
By taking something that is often inflammatory.
Yes.
Like a kombucha or a coffee, you know, or whatever it is during that period of time. So one of the things I recommend, and this is totally revolutionary. This is a biohacking, like countercultural fuck you activity, but is to take 20 minutes and rest between 2 and 6.
Hey, you're talking to the napping queen. That is my nap time.
You go, girl. You nap it.
Every day, almost. Every day between 2 and 6, at some point, you will find me lying down.
Yep. It's natural, right? You're someone who is attuned to your energy system, right? You know what it needs, so you do it. So I recommend like, hey, if you are at work, you can't like go lie down, you know, like I call it a sense break.
Yeah.
Where it's like you just, you know, don't take anything in for 10, 15, whatever you can do, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Just don't take anything in. Just like look at the clouds or, you know, just like turn your desk chair and look out the window, set an alarm, you know, for 10 minutes or something like that. Because it's the senses that need the rest. It's the mind and the organs of the mind, eyeballs, tongues, ears, right? Those are what need the rest. And that can be done. And, you know, I mean, I would say technically you could do it in a Zoom meeting.
Just lie down under your desk, you know? No one will notice. Close the door.
And I think that for some people, you know, you have to like then begin a study of your rhythms at that time of day. What's going on between 2 and 6, right? What do you notice? You know, is there a period there where you could do a little resting of the senses, you know?
Yeah. It's so interesting. When I think of like my life, it's always actually been a really big habit for me. Like throughout my life, even I would get home from school like around 3:30, 4 p.m. The first thing I do was go lie down.
Wow.
Like even 20 minutes. It was like so essential for me, actually, now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
Because it's not, I mean, for a while I didn't do it. For a while it was like, just push through. You can do it. Take the coffee, especially when I was like really hardcore Ashtanga practitioner, you know? It was like, just make it another 2 or 3 hours and then you can go to bed.
Yes.
Also, you're like terrified if you lie down, you're going to like
conk out.
Yeah, you're not going to wake up till 11 p.m. at night, which is part of the problem when you're trying to wake up at 3 in the morning.
Yes.
Anyway, that's a whole other conversation for a different day. But when you're not totally exhausted from, you know, fucking up your biorhythms, you can lie down and close your eyes for 20 minutes and it's very restorative. It's very relaxing. Or even just like you say, just just do a meditation, like do your 20-minute, you know, transcendental meditation at work, sitting up in your desk. And it's so restorative. It's so helpful.
Yeah, and it's a magic time there, you know, according to sort of Ayurveda's daily clock. So that 2 to 6 p.m., like resting somehow. And it could even just be taking a walk, you know, maybe just not working, you know, for 10 or 15 minutes. Like it doesn't have to be meditating or pranayama or something. Sometimes that's a tall order.
Yeah, go take a smoke break without smoking.
Without smoking, exactly. Like that's why I think one of the reasons smoking is so popular. It's your prana, it's your breath. You know, it gets you connected to your breath. So,
and you get to get outside and away from everything. And
totally, it's like me time, right? You know, so it's the same idea. It's the same idea.
I have to go take a smoke break.
Yeah, even though I don't smoke, I'm going to have a smoke break. You know, yeah, or like a water break. I'm going to have a drinks break. You know, water.
Yeah, outside.
Yeah. So I think that's important. The sense break that's a practice that people can play with.
Beautiful.
The other thing I do want to mention around your question was like, how do we centralize fire and how do we prioritize tejas? I think another thing, this is very nuts and boltsy, but another thing that a lot of people do is use a lot of inflammatory substances like coffee and kombucha and, pickled things. Yeah, spicy things, like I think in your constitution, you can probably handle coffee better than someone like me. Like there are people who can handle a cup of coffee a day, but I am not one of them. Like I'll have all sorts of issues if I drink coffee regularly.
Because you have so much vata, right?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Pitta and vata. And those are the two aspects of the body that come into play during perimenopause and menopause. And that's, again, a time where inflammation can be harder to manage, and there's a lot of heat and dryness going on. And those are the enemy of the Ashtanga practitioner.
Yeah.
Hot
and it's
dry.
Also the things that the Ashtanga practice increases as well is the heat and the air, the dryness.
Yep. And so it needs to be balanced. And I think we learned a lot of those. We were told to eat ghee. We were told to do oil massage regularly. We were taught we were told to eat wheat, which is like, it's the oiliest of the grains.
Yeah.
We were taught all of the things that were necessary to balance the practice because we were like Jedi, we were on a specific path. And I think that's what people don't understand about the practice is it's more like a martial art than the yoga as it's taught in our countries anyway.
Totally. Yeah.
Where it's within a very specific context. You're doing a very specific evolutionary path, and it's like you're in a science lab. It's like Breaking Bad, you're in the lab and like you're doing this thing. People who gravitate towards it tend to be the ones who already have a lot of the heat and the dryness or the air in their bodies. But what I love about Ayurveda is it's taught me so many of the tools that have helped me to bolster the body. And when I started studying Ayurveda, I started being a lot more mellow about my practice. Like I took it down a notch. So there was less sweating. I don't have a lot of water to lose, so there was less sweating. I started changing my diet and like really taking care to eat more ghee, which Punjabi Joyce would always say, eat more ghee, like, eat ice cream was another one.
Ice cream,
like dairy. Yeah. And all those things make sense, but I think the yogis, they want to eat green juice and, that kind of thing, that's damaging that you can't do that. You can't do that here,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the oil was always so important. And I think that's also good for the pitta too, right? Like, is that one of the things that helps to concentrate the tejas a bit more is like, so when you think of putting ghee on a fire, right, it makes the fire increase, but like in a very specific way rather than, go everywhere. It concentrates it.
Yep. It's like, it's a steady fuel.
Yeah.
Ghee is a steady fuel for flame. Most oil doesn't have to be ghee. I think it could be olive oil, it could be sesame oil, coconut oil, whatever is bioregional for people. And, I think what we also need to do is digest it. Yeah. So then we get into the question of the digestion, which is so big in Ayurveda. And, there's very simple techniques that balance digestion, things like eating lunch, and having a little less at night and not eating before the previous meal has been digested. Like that's huge. And I think a lot of people just kind of snack before the previous meal has been digested. That sort of thing messes up the fire in the belly, which I call the mothership. That's the mothership of all fire element in the body, the way that Ayurveda observes a body. So digestion and nourishment are paramount in this story of how we keep our luminosity.
Right. And inflammation down too, it sounds like.
Yep. Yeah. I think if we think of inflammation as sort of misdirected fire element, that's a nice way to think about it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think that's also sort of another thing that often Ashtanga yoga practitioners, we don't eat until like we're doing all this intermittent fasting. We're not eating regularly. And I think that's also not so helpful sometimes, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's helpful to have that breakfast or, lunch.
Yeah.
And then like try to eat earlier in the night. But, like these periods, I think it can kind of just throw the system off in a way when you're fasting so much, or like,
Yeah.
like always trying to push off your hunger until like a later time.
Right. Yes. And like flames do not like to go without fuel.
Yeah.
They're going to go find something to do
Right.
in your body, right?
Yeah.
They're going to go find something to eat. And that's how we get that misdirected flame. Yeah. So like nourishment after practice, super important.
Yeah. You got to feed the fire, right?
Yeah, you do, or it will begin to feed on your tissues.
So then for like women, I mean, we have the menstrual cycle and it's, kind of connected with the lunar cycle as far as like nature is concerned, with like a rising, like the energy sort of optimization time, and then more of a resting time on the way down. But how does that work for women when we start to lose our menstruation or it becomes irregular during perimenopause? Like, how do we help to nourish ourselves or create healing in our body during these like times of transition, I guess?
Yeah, it's definitely a transition. So one of the things that I have found a super helpful like framework for this conversation is, again, we go back to that essential balance between solar and lunar qualities, right, in the body. So our hormones, we kind of have, I'm going to just simplify, right, the hormone thing. I don't love the way the hormone conversation is going right now. I don't think it's helpful for women a lot of the time. I think we have this very vague term of hormonal balance.
Right.
Which, what the fuck does that mean?
Yeah,
and
what
so I
does
noticed,
that mean?
Right? And everybody's blaming everything on it.
They're always changing too. So like, what is balance?
Yeah, right. So that's where I'm like, well, balance is a balance of solar and lunar qualities. It is the essence and the basis of the Samkhya philosophy, right?
Yeah,
we can take it all the way back to the beginning and then trace it from there to sex hormones and stress hormones.
Yeah.
Right. So we've got stress hormones like estrogen and progesterone, right, that send all the messages that cause the endometrium to do this and do that. The follicular releasing hormone, all the things, right, that the body is doing with the eggs and the bleeding. Those are all being governed by these sex hormones. And so the sex hormones are providing the shukra, which is the fertility component in the body. Estrogen is very much responsible for that. Progesterone is the one that comes in and balances estrogen and says, hey, we've got enough of you, right? Like now we're going to move in the other direction. 2 weeks, right? 2 weeks after the cycle, we're going to move in the other direction and we're going to stop building the shukra because it didn't get, the egg. So we got to get rid of the egg. We got to get rid of the lining and start again, right?
Yeah.
And then we've got that's very much a lunar aspect, right? Those hormones create juice, especially estrogen is like the big, juicy, like number one, top of the list in the body. And then we have the stress hormones, which we could just hone in on adrenaline and cortisol. And those two are very heating. They're very hot. Yeah. They are cooking, right? And will also dry out the body. So our bodies exist in this nice balance with every single hormone that you can like point a stick at is existing in this context of how they interrelate in a body. And that's why I think the way that we look at hormones in the Western front can be confusing because we try to pluck one out, right, and mess with it a little bit, but it's in relationship, with all the other ones. Yeah. So it's very much a holistic system going on. So the sex hormones and the stress hormones are balancing each other. Yeah. Right. So that we don't so that when the stress comes in, like cortisol is the one that comes in for long term like it stays in the bloodstream longer. So say, we're having like an apocalypse, right? Everyone's on the run. You know what I mean? You're going to get cortisol at that time because your body is like, there is no end in sight. We need fuel. We need movement. We need the arms and legs to get all of the energy, right? So that's cortisol. And then the adrenaline is the quick one that you get with coffee, where it comes in. It's just like, whoop. So like you almost hit someone in your car or you almost get hit by, you get that adrenaline.
Yeah.
That's the thing that comes in real fast, real strong.
Adrenaline,
so you can like lift
good
a
one.
car. Yeah, it's a fun one. It's a fun one. Definitely get that from backbending.
Yeah.
Where those times where you just, you leave practice and you just want to go like climb a mountain.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's in the early years also, that one.
Right. Like I could use a bit more of that.
These days. So we have that kind of like hot and dry, like stimulating.
Yeah.
The stress hormones stimulate the body on purpose so we could do shit that we need to do to survive.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's very solar. That's very solar, right? And then the sex hormones, they're doing the lunar thing.
Yeah.
They're like, there's enough to go around. Let's make some babies. Like let's create. Like let's create. It's not we're running from a dinosaur. It's we're nesting.
Yeah, we got time here.
Yeah,
and resources.
There's time, exactly. There's resources. There's space. Like all the things that you need in order to be fertile. And to potentially gestate, and just to create, right? Anybody who's trying to create something knows that if they're just in a stress response all the time, you just don't have that creative energy. So it's problematic, for many reasons. So here's what's interesting about, Dr. Claudia Welch, right? I think a lot of our listeners know about her and her book, Balance Your Hormones, Balance Your Life. She's the one who really like fleshed it out in this way, where that essential balance between these two sets of hormones, let's say, really takes a hit around perimenopause and menopause because the body starts to kind of drastically lose estrogen.
Right.
Because a body, being very smart, knows like we're aging here. We need all hands on deck in the nourishment department. Like our tissues do not have what it takes to make babies again, right? Or anymore. We're not doing that. So we're going to channel all the resources in another direction, and the estrogen just kind of slows down. So we don't keep getting the message to create more, like fertile components. So that's a natural thing. Yeah. The body still does produce estrogen in other places, like namely the adrenals, the adrenal glands. But the ovaries will stop producing, as we get older. And I think what's interesting about that transition that's very notable, I think very helpful thing for women to know is that it happens in a very exponential way around menopause. So it's like we go through this thing that could be a year long, a couple years long, where it's like happening fast.
Right.
And so because we're losing that, all of those, the ushy gushiness, the softness, the smoothness, the coolness.
Yeah.
The stress hormones are in a prime position to wreak havoc on our bodies during that time.
Yeah.
Unless we balance it. Right? Unless we balance it. So a lot of what this book is about in relation to burnout and stress and perimenopause and menopause symptoms is about finding those qualities primarily through food. So again, I'm known for recipes, right? There's recipes in the book. I talk about things like demulcents, like chia seeds and licorice.
Nice.
I talk about the high mineral foods that feed blood and bone, like seaweeds. The sea moss is getting really famous right now. There's a recipe in the book for that. Those things balance the thyroid, because the master glands can start taking a hit if we're seeing changes like this in the essential balance of our hormones. So while we work to nourish and create those, what we call brahmana qualities in Ayurveda, those are the building qualities, and they all fall under the lunar aspects of nature. We want more of those, right? And at the same time, we're looking at the stress factor. Why are we stressing? Right? And so one of the things that I noticed that's so interesting over the years of working with women in perimenopause and menopause is that we get less resilient to stress because we lose the buffer of
Right.
that estrogen provides.
Yeah.
And it's natural.
Yeah.
It's not my fault, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't mean I'm screwing up. What am I eating wrong? What am I doing wrong? It's natural, right? So we want to like get kind of, again, all hands on deck in the nourishment department.
Yeah.
But what I know, the other thing I noticed, so we're less resilient to stress. But the thing that is so cool about women experiencing menopause is they are less willing to give a fuck about stuff that doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
It's like this change that I see women go through, and it's not necessarily coming from a place of frustration. Yeah. It's coming from a place where the energy in the body wants to move in a different way. Yeah. And that's a physical thing. It's happening because of physical changes that are baked into the aging process. Yeah. Right? Of how our qualities change. And so women get to this place where it's like there's an opening of sorts in the mental space. Because the energy it's moving, its directionality is different, its quantity, the pace of energy, all of these things are going to change because the physical qualities of the body are changing. And that's going to change how we manifest in our lives, in our relationships, in our work, right? Yeah. It's going to change like what we want to do from day to day, what we want to do with our lives. And that's what I've noticed working with women in this transition is that all these changes are happening. And I feel like if we have a framework like the one I find in Ayurveda in which to understand and weather these changes, and embrace them actually, and work with them, and bolster the system in ways that is needed at the right time, it can be a real an evolution, a real spiritual experience of the body, kind of like how I would imagine birthing is. Yeah. Like it changes you, you're not the same person after experiencing that, Yeah. So I'm looking at this transition from a very subtle and spiritual perspective. And physically, there's actually so much we can do through Ayurveda and through food and through substances to provide the qualities that are lacking and it's that lack that causes all of these symptoms.
So what would be like your top 3 things besides napping? 'Cause we talked about that.
I would say women are going to notice probably that their digestion is changing, like their appetite might change. It might get slower. It might get faster at different times. Women might become more in need of dense foods, such as what we call protein. Yeah. Right?
I've been told by so many people that I have to eat meat. I'm like,
and that's the densest food out there, because our body is literally losing that earth element, and so in order to temper the change, the more of those kinds of dense foods that we can take, the better. Right. So, this is my first book it does contain a chicken soup recipe. It's the first of the 4 books that has any meat in it. And there's a story from one of my colleagues who, while having 2 kids, had to eat meat, had to, And so she tells her story of what she went through. She's also a yoga person, So I wanted to share that because I think a lot of women go through it, and it makes sense, right? Through this framework, we're discussing why a body would need more, in quote, protein, right? Which is really just earth element and more dense foods and more healthy fats and the ability to digest them. So digestion's going to change. What we eat might change when we eat. These things might need to shift during perimenopause for sure. Yeah. And I think that's where we can get some real balancing action going on during the perimenopause years is by attuning to these changes. And instead of what I see a lot of us doing, self-included, is getting pissed about it, or really kind of focusing on how can I fix this? Why is this wrong? Yeah. Why is this happening to me? Exactly. I feel like that's a really problematic thing that a lot of us do.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think it's like a frustration in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, exactly what you're saying, because you figured out what works for you for so long, and then it just doesn't work anymore. And you're like, what the fuck?
Exactly. And it's natural. How would your body undergo tectonic changes, right? Physically as well as energetically, and not want different food?
Yeah.
You know, or to eat at different times, or to sleep more or less, or whatever it is.
Exactly. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I used to also be one who like could go on 6 hours of sleep so easily, right?
Yeah.
Like forever. No problem. And now I'm like, man, if I get less than 7.5, I'm suffering a little.
And it's when we sleep, Harmony, that the body digests the stress hormones from the blood.
Gosh, yeah.
Right? We need to keep that balance going. So lovely that you can sleep a little more. I think it's really hard for women when the sleep goes out the window.
Yeah.
And I think there's probably a lot of subtle tools that you offer, like pranayams and such, that can really help people, drop in to that parasympathetic, as you're saying, and get sleep. Because if the stress hormones are boss, we're going to have to learn how to regulate, as you say, the nervous system, because, it's happening for these sort of physical reasons in the body, but which helps us understand it and be like, oh, okay, this is natural, this is happening, right? And then I think these subtle tools for things like sleep are super helpful.
Yes, so important. Important to listen too. I think that's the thing you're speaking to, is that when things are changing and they're just different than they used to be, or you're different, you're feeling different, then there's a tendency, to not want us to surrender to the change, right? Like, I'm going to fight this. I'm going to make it go back to the way it used to be. Right? But there's this element of surrender that has to happen. Like, you can try and fight against it. I mean, like, great, go for it. But I mean, if it works, I'd be all for it, but it's not really going to work, right? There has to be this acceptance and this surrender to what is, like, what is happening for you. And I think that's also part of this lunar kind of energy that you're speaking to, is, it's the receptive, it's the embracing, the allowing, like, all of those qualities, are strengths actually during transition, rather than like the forcing or the fighting or the railing against it, trying to change it to be something that it's not.
Right But that, the messaging that we're getting culturally is, do this to anti-aging. What the hell's that, right? It's all about stopping this thing from happening. I mean, Ayurveda is a longevity. It's very clearly from the beginning of the text about longevity. Right? So yes, we do want to oppose aging, and and we have to, as you say, surrender at times. I'm not great at surrender. It is not like my natural thing. Like, a lot of these things for me are very hard won. So I'm still like, I'm going to, I want to wrinkle free as long as possible. Or I'm just like, I'm interested, how much is my boat going to get rocked? I'm 45 now. But one of the things I do want to speak to is that, I think a lot of women have high stress levels. And maybe their estrogen isn't in the tectonic change yet. Like, if you're 35, you're 37, you're early 40s, like, you don't need to. You're not in perimenopause. Some women are, but a lot of them aren't. And it's actually just that we're already seeing the imbalance in the sex and stress hormones because we're either not nourishing properly or resting enough, or we're going too much. It's that essential balance is off. I see that a lot, and I see people blaming it on hormone imbalance and perimenopause before it's time. Right?
No, I can speak to this directly, because I was like, for sure I'm in perimenopause, and my menstruation was like all over the map.
Yeah.
And I ended up going to see a functional medicine doctor thinking I'm in perimenopause. He's like, you're not in perimenopause.
You're not. Right?
I mean, it really did, like, the hardcore tests, like, like the urine, saliva, and blood test all on the same day, on the 19th day of the cycle. Like, it's all very scientific. But what he did find out was that there was a problem with the thyroid. So there was, like, a hormonal problem, and exactly what you're talking about, this sort of disruption of the stress hormones, accumulating versus the sex hormones, and a disruption in the master coordinator of everything. But I think we think, oh, I'm in perimenopause. That's I think for women, it's maybe the easiest assumption to make.
Exactly.
Because it's maybe the only thing we're really thinking about or we know about, but also stress can put you in that state.
It can put you in early perimenopause. And that's not, we don't have to go there, that we do not have to live like that,
Yeah.
So we don't have to be using estrogen replacement, in our early 40s. Maybe when we're like 49, 50, 51, that kind of thing. But I really feel like the whole period of mid to late 40s can absolutely bolster the body in such a way that we weather the change of menopause. In a way that's not so bad.
Yeah. Ease into it a little.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it. I'm a professional. Like I'm a professional observer. So I can't wait for all this stuff to kind of happen to me. I'm very curious. I think I'll learn a lot.
Your next book might be Ayurveda and menopause.
Yeah, right. Like a little deeper dive there. Yeah. My community is very much like in the perimenopause place, but what I see a lot of the time is it's happening earlier than I think is natural for people.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that stress plays a big role in this, and it's so important to create that balance. If we think of stress as this solar energy, right? And think of it in terms of these subtle energies, then how can we bring some more of this resting, some more of this lunar energy, some more softness to our days and our lives in a way.
And acceptance too, Yeah, but it brings me back to the times of the ridiculousness of stressing out about the yoga practice.
Right.
Like how counterintuitive that is.
Right. Yeah. I know. Yeah. We get really upset about stuff.
Yeah. And, so I say that for our listeners. I'm like, I know you're out there. I know you heard that. Are you stressing about your practice?
I can't do Kapotasana.
Or, I have to miss Saturday because I'm traveling. It's like, hey, let's get back to like the root, capital Y in yoga.
Why you're doing it.
Why we do this. Yes.
It's true. It's so true. So if you could leave listeners with one thing that you think would be like the most helpful as far as creating balance, for women in today's world where, and especially I do think in your 30s and especially your 40s, life is busy, and like often you're taking care of sick parents, you're taking care of children, you're also working a full-time job. And then if you're an Ashtanga yoga practitioner, you have these ridiculous expectations of yourself to, also do a 2-hour practice and feel guilty for some reason if you're not doing it, right?
Yeah.
All of that leads to a lot of expectations and stress. How can we help ourselves out?
Yeah. I think oil massage. I'm going to keep it practical, right? Because I could totally go philosophical here. About santosha or contentment. I do believe contentment is, the texts say that patience is the means by which the mind controls itself.
That's
patience, right, is the means by which the mind controls itself. Like, that's a big statement. There's not a lot said in the text like that. That's big. So I do think there is something about that's slow. Patience is slow,
Yeah. It's also present, which I love. Like, it's just like, if you really tune into like where patience sits in your body and in your mind, right? Like, like if you're like, okay, where can I find patience? all of a sudden I feel like my whole energy goes back and in. It's like, oh, it's just like
That's
really
Tejas.
present. Yeah.
That's how you get your prana back, into a supportive relationship with Tejas. That
I feel
feeling.
like this is a secret key.
Absolutely. It is.
Yeah.
It totally is. That's why I think there's that one-liner in the text about patience, And in the practice, like I can get that feeling in a pose.
Yeah.
But I think one of the problems sometimes with the Ashtanga for me is it moves too fast.
Yeah.
Because if I'm moving fast the whole time, I cannot drop back in like that. So my practice is like epically slow, it's epically slow. People are always like, doesn't look like Ashtanga what you're doing, Yeah.
I think I'm on your train these days. I'm like, it takes me about 40 minutes to do sun salutations. Is that wrong?
Right.
Yeah. Like, no wonder I can never do a full practice.
Oh, no, it'd be like 3 hours or something to do. Yeah. Yeah. But there's that feeling you described. That is the feeling, like, that's when the Tejas goes boop, and it just like, that flame just like kicks into its essential nature in the body.
Beautiful.
Yeah. But if we want to just like women want to do something, right, to balance the stress hormones situation, like get more of these Brahmana qualities in the body, I do think the oil massage is, pretty important. And
like, okay, so then what oil would you suggest? What are the best oils, do you think?
Classically, it's sesame oil, but sesame oil is warming. So if a person's feeling hot, whether it's hot flash or like systemic inflammation, they probably would want to go towards something cool, which is either coconut oil or what we would call like a pitta oil, where the sesame oil has been cooked with herbs that like neem, like bitter herbs that cool the body. That's number one, honestly, is because when you make an herbal oil, the qualities of the herbs change the quality of the oil. Right. And so if somebody's really going to go for it and get an herbal oil, I think that's great. I have links to the companies that I buy from, discount codes, all that stuff's on my website. It's on my Instagram. Both of those will be in the show notes, awesome. Right?
Yeah.
So there's oils with ghee. Farm True in Connecticut, they make oils with ghee and sesame, which is pretty fantastic for Ashtanga practitioners.
Yeah.
So if you just want to get the party started and you're hot, I would just say try coconut oil, for starters. But it's not nearly as rich, as sesame. So if there's really a lot of dryness, then sesame is often required. Olive oil works, right? Not the crappy kind, though. Yeah. It has to be like good quality olive oil, which is going to be a lot more expensive to put on your skin. And then sometimes something like almond or sunflower. Those are middle road that I think people who aren't sure what to do could just start there. Yeah. It doesn't have to be every day. Could do it once a week, twice a week. It makes a difference.
And do you leave it on or do you wash it off?
Well, you want to leave it on for a while. Like if people can massage the whole body with the oil and then hang around, for 20, 30 minutes, even if it's 5 minutes.
In their oil clothes.
Yeah. Like I walk around with like a towel, I do dishes and stuff like that. Yeah. It's so funny in our house. There's like a glistening body in the kitchen. You're like, oh, oil massage day, But then you take the shower and then you probably will have absorbed most of it. That would be the ideal, that it's not just sitting on your skin, but that it's absorbed. So you just wash the hairy parts and go about your business. Yeah. But 5 minutes to 45 minutes.
Okay. 5 to 45 minutes. And what about the hair? Do you put it on your head? Like, I know when we were taught to do castor oil, you put it on your head first and then you get the whole body.
You definitely want to do the ears. The head, yes.
The inside of the ears?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, like the outside of the ear. And I'll usually like kind of stick my pinky in there as well. Yeah, just get a little, because the ears they're very airy, very aeraceous. So I will recommend the head for the most part. One always wants to use a cooling oil on the head. So like coconut on the head is kind of ideal. My hair absorbs the oil. So I'll do it like maybe once a week when I know that I'm going to, take a shower and wash my hair.
Yeah, you need
after.
to use shampoo, good shampoo, right?
Yeah, and then you put the shampoo on without water first. Shampoo directly on the oil. That's the trick.
Okay.
And then you kind of scrub it around and then add like a little handful of water.
Yeah.
That's the trick, because if the water gets on there first,
lather it up more.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The water would stop it from pulling the oil out.
Exactly. Yeah, so that makes a huge difference. But
expert.
I think that the head massage to me is something a little more like special, a little more luxurious, special day, because it's just a little added thing.
You have some time. You have some time here.
Yes,
this is all you're doing today is the oil bath.
Or for like the next hour, Yeah,
and washing dishes.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So you could do it. You can, it's really good for like mental fluctuation to oil the head. It's really good when there's like racing thoughts or difficulty like calming down or slowing down. Oil on the head is very slowing for the mind. Yeah, it's just contraindicated for people who feel like they have like a brain fog or congestion. If there's already gunk going on in the head, sinuses, anything like that, it will make it worse.
Yeah, I remember. I've noticed that. You might know the answer to this question. So we've had this interesting question about why castor oil in the Ashtanga tradition, because it's not really recommended in Ayurveda, is it? Like, it's not really an Ayurvedic thing so much.
There are massage oils with castor in them. They are usually used in conjunction, like it's mixed. It's a compounded formula. It's not straight castor. Yeah, you won't hear a lot about the straight castor, but castor oil, it removes stagnation. It penetrates in a way that no other oil does. So it can get into the tissues, and it like moves stuff. It opens the channels.
Huh.
So I'm going to guess that's why it was such a big part of the Ashtanga lineage, because we're moving so much energy.
Yeah.
And you know how you get like a block, some like a grunty kind of situation.
Yeah.
You get a block going somewhere. The castor definitely moves it. I think that's why it was helpful with like soreness.
Yeah.
Pain.
Yeah.
And it's considered cooling, castor.
Okay.
If
it is
used
cooling
correctly, if the body digests it. When it's used internally, it's hot.
Okay.
So that's different, but it will kind of like remove heat from the body. So those formulas with some in it like would be used like in really hot weather. The southern formulas.
Yeah. To reduce the heat, the buildup of heat. So basically also reducing inflammation then.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I definitely know in hot season in India it was helpful.
Yeah. You don't want to put on like sesame, there's a lot of oils you don't want to use in hot, humid weather.
But also like, I don't know, would you use castor in the West? It really messes up your drains.
No, I have tried. I will never do that again. I didn't have the soap nut powder to remove it.
Yeah. You gotta use dish soap.
You don't get it all. It's just like, I don't know. It's not worth it. I'll do it in India, but with a bathroom, the whole bathroom is, you can just hose it down.
Totally.
But I don't do it here at all. Yeah. I'll do like castor oil packs. I talk about those in the book. We can use those over the uterus, ovaries, like thyroid. Like packs definitely I use in this country, but not in the full body.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know. Put everyone's minds at ease with their oil bath routine.
I know. People always ask me, do you do that when you get home? I'm like, no, don't try it. Don't do it.
Unless, like you're saying, unless you have one of those like European bathrooms or Indian bathrooms where you can just like hose down the whole bathroom. It's all tile. Right. Your shower's like in the same room as the toilet and everything.
Right. And if you have like soap nut to remove it or like,
also helpful.
Ground up mung beans. Yeah. I feel like that's really important too. Get it off with something natural.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Kate, for coming on. It's been such a wonderful conversation. I learned a lot and feel like I'm really excited to dive into your book and learn even more. So I hope people can purchase it. It's out now and they can get it at all the places, right? Every day
anywhere.
Ayurveda for women's health.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for sharing. I have an annual membership. That's definitely the most affordable way to get like all the classes. So you get all the seasonal like self-care and cooking classes, and we meet as a group once a month. So that's a fantastic way to get involved. I also have like all sorts of a la carte things. Yeah. And I am working on a training for people who want to learn Ayurvedic digestion, nutrition, and cooking.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that's not going to happen until like the end of 2024 or early 25, but that's the new thing coming down the pipe. Yeah.
Awesome. Something for people to look forward to. Look out for.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And you usually do like a cleanse at some point too, don't you?
Yep. The spring cleanse.
Okay.
Yeah.
You do an autumn one too? A fall?
Usually mid-October. So people can find that for sure on my website. And that's also a great way to do like a crash course in Ayurveda lifestyle, because we're talking about food and spices and we're doing oil massages and all the things. So that's a really fun kind of experiential program that lasts for 10 days and in community. That is probably one of my more popular and more high touch programs. Beautiful. Where I'm guiding people through like a traditional process, and it's a great way to learn.
Yeah. And a good way to reduce vata in the autumn season.
Very true. So true. I love a fall cleanse. It's so great.
Yeah. Good. Get rid of all those summer toxins.
Yep. Exactly. Summer inflammation.
It happens. Well, we'll have all these links in the show notes and people can come and find you. And they can find you on Instagram at Kate O'Donnell Ayurveda, right?
KateO'Donnell.Ayurveda. Yeah. My website is healwithkate.org.
Beautiful.
Yeah, thanks. So good to see you.
Hey, it's summertime and we have a fun summer challenge, a little game to play with you this summer. We want to get to know you. We want to stay connected and we want to see where you are listening to this episode of the Finding Harmony podcast. So wherever you are on your summer vacation, at the beach, at the cabin, or even a staycation at home, relaxing in the sun, maybe on your patio or by a fire pit, snap a photo, tag us at Finding Harmony Podcast on Instagram, and we cannot wait to see where you're listening to the Finding Harmony podcast and reach out and connect with you and say hi. So come on over, take a photo, post it to your social media, your stories, or a post, tag at Finding Harmony Podcast, and let us know what episode you're listening to, what you loved about the episode you're listening to. I can't wait to see you and connect with you online soon. That's it. We've concluded another episode of the Finding Harmony podcast. I just want to thank you so much for doing the work that changes the world, starting with yourself. It truly does make a huge difference. Please make sure you have your automatic downloads turned on wherever you listen so you don't miss any of the upcoming episodes. I have so much more magic I can't wait to share with you. Lastly, if you're on Instagram, I love connecting and hearing from you. So come on over and say hello at Finding Harmony Podcast. And you can also come say hello to me personally at Harmony Slater Official. Thank you again for being here. I cannot wait to share more with you in our next episode.